Hey everyone, Alex Talander here, and welcome to our bonus content as we work on putting Ostium Season 6 together. We're continuing with our Behind the Ostium series as we go in depth with the making and discussion of how each episode of Ostium came to be, as well as much more. I am joined by Dwayne Farver, a big fan of the show and creator of the spin-off podcast Manifestations. If you enjoy the Behind the Ostium series, you can get full access to over 50 episodes right now by supporting Team Ostium on Patreon at patreon.com/ostiumpodcast. You'll also get access to a bunch of other bonus content on there too. Once again, that's patreon.com/ostiumpodcast. We'll continue working on getting Ostium Season 6 ready for release in 2022, but for now, sit back and enjoy another episode of Behind the Ostium. So we last left off, we were going over some examples of world building. You talked about some book series and different authors you like about world building. And so now I wanted to go back to, you'd mentioned earlier that there are two kinds of when you're world building approaches you can use. There's the top-down approach or the bottom-up. So I'm just going to start by reading off the wiki definitions for each of these, and then I'll start talking about how I applied this and how this worked for me with Ostium, and then after that you'll talk about manifestations and what approach you used for your show and how you world built with that. So according to wiki, world building can be designed from the top down or bottom up, or by a combination of these approaches. The official world building guidelines for Dungeons & Dragons refer to these terms as outside in and inside out, respectively. Are you familiar with that? Have you heard of that before?
Not by those names, but I think I understand the concept, yeah.
Right. In the top-down approach, the designer first creates a general overview of the world, determining broad characteristics such as the world's inhabitants, technology level, major geographic features, climate, and history. From there, they develop the rest of the world in increasing detail. This approach might involve creation of the world's basics, followed by levels such as continents, civilizations, nations, cities, and towns. A world constructed from top down tends to be well integrated with individual components fitting together appropriately. It can, however, require considerable work before enough detail is completed for the setting to be useful, such as in the setting of a story. Now, with the bottom-up approach, the designer focuses on a small part of the world needed for his or her purposes. This location is given considerable detail such as local geography, culture, social structure, government, politics, commerce, and history. Prominent local individuals may be described, including their relationships to each other. The surrounding areas are then described in a lower level of detail, with description growing more general with increasing distance from the initial location. The designer can subsequently enhance the description of other areas in the world. This approach provides for an almost immediate applicability of the setting, with details pertinent to a certain story or situation. The approach can yield a world plagued with inconsistencies, however. By combining the top-down and bottom-up approaches, a designer can enjoy the benefits of both. This is very hard to accomplish, however, because the need to start from both sides create twice as much work, which may delay the desired product. Immediately when I think of the top-down approach, it makes me think of epic fantasy series and novels and things like that, where there's, a ton of world and maps. Lord of the Rings, as you talked about before, that's a good example, I think, of the top-down approach, where a lot of it was planned out before he probably even started writing the story or anything like that. What do you think?
I would agree with that, because just knowing some of the history around the writing of the story, he did a lot of planning. Especially with the history,
right?
And I know his son has since released a lot of that information. The thing that I really I was trying to think of another author that did a lot of that, and none's coming to mind right now. But the thing I like with the Tolkien is that he had so much of the history already in his mind that it almost seemed like it was, as he was writing the story that we were going to know as the Lord of the Rings, there was so much back history that we were never meant to really know if his son hadn't released it. Which, all of that extra information is, a geek like me just really loves.
And I think it was kind of unique with him because you had literally decades of material that he was just writing down and scribbling down over the years and years and years. So he's a little unusual in that, I think. An author that comes to mind, a big fantasy author, is Brandon Sanderson. He has his Stormlight Archive, which is going to be a 10-book series. He's got the first 2 out. Each one is over 1,000 pages long. They just seem to get longer with each one. That one definitely feels like one where he's developed a lot of the world and stuff beforehand, and a lot of details that we're going to learn about further along as the books come out. But we don't know yet, but he's already got planned out and worked out. With Ostium, I like to think that I would want it to be a giant, big series that it's kind of becoming now, and would have gone from the top-down method. But I was starting out with just a simple story to kind of hook me into something I wanted to write about. So I really started from the bottom-up approach to begin with, where started with a simple character, a simple location, and a mystery. And then kind of going along with the character and finding what the story was there and seeing what happened. And it wasn't really until season 2, with the more characters and the more I started developing, I realized, because this is going to be a long-running series and I wasn't at all clear of where exactly it was going to go and how much I needed to know as I was writing along, I needed to work that out now, because otherwise I was going to get to a point where I would have to explain something and wouldn't have it all planned out yet and would just hit a wall, basically. So that's really what season 2 is when I started. Usually doing my day job, I'd be kind of world building in my head from this top-down approach of setting rules, setting the world. And then with seasons 3 and 4, with the development of the Ostium network and this whole place, an alternate world, that's when I really started expanding the world as big as it could possibly be. Setting down a lot of these rules and developing it further and further, and knowing along this way I also found out what the ending was going to be for Ostium, which we will presumably get to one day, hopefully. But it's something that I have worked out, but it won't be released until we actually get to that point. But I've got a lot of notes jotted down, a lot of things worked out, and a lot of kind of an overarching structure of how the whole world works, which is helped me both in developing the story as I go along with the characters, but also allowing me to do other things like the spin-off series of the Ostium Files, where I know I've got a rough structure about it, and then I'm allowed to play within those rules and do different things that is on a tangent separate from the main storyline that we're telling, and things like with you with manifestations in your Ostium file you wrote. And it's really worked out well, I think, because it's allowing me to kind of expand way more. Same thing with Cersei now, where it's a spin-off show, and it's something where I found out with this character, as we get to the end of season 4, you'll learn about that she's going to play a much bigger part than I expected her to, and that once I realized this, I was able to go with it because I already knew the overarching structure of the world of Ostium and how the whole system worked. I could easily fit her into it and have her tell her own story without it feeling like I was starting something completely different, or feeling like I didn't know where it was going to go with writing her, and that I might get either thrown off or lost or not fit to the right structure of Ostium. And because I had that already worked out, it was a lot more freeing to be able to do that. I have also started a short story series. The first part is written, and again, it's a kind of involving the world a little bit of the Ostium, but it's a totally separate story that's on its own. And in the back of my head, I also have a book series that I hope to one day write, which will give a lot more of the kind of a background story to other characters and things going on in the world of Ostium that I don't think the main show is ever going to tell. But I hope to kind of reveal this a lot in the book series that I hopefully one day get to write. And again, all this wouldn't really have been possible if I hadn't started with that top-down approach as I go along to really fill in all these details, fill in the rules, and fill in the structure so that I knew where I was kind of going and that I wouldn't get lost. How does that come across? Do you think that with Ostium?
Listening to what you said, I do see season 2 really showing the world in general in Ostium is starting to get larger. So that does make a lot of sense the way you said how you worked it, and then especially.
And I know you've also said you've had some thoughts along the way, and now pretty much as this comes out, this will be season 4 will be all done. You've had thoughts along the way about which way you thought it was going to go, and I think you said it pretty much did go where you thought it was going to go. Is that correct?
At the beginning of season 2, I believe it was the beginning of season 2. I had this isn't going out to before an episode, so there's no.
No, it's okay to spoil here because by this point everything is out. So yeah, it gets released.
This is definitely not a spoiler. But
if it is, stop listening now.
No, at the beginning of season 2, I had it in my mind. I'm like, Jake created the Ostium Network. I was like, Jake is in control. He doesn't know it yet, or maybe a future version of Jake is actually controlling the Ostium Network. And it, in essence, that did come to pass.
It was just a different Jake. That's all.
Yes, yeah. But because they were in season 2, they're talking about the mysterious person that no one ever sees, and I'm like, that's Jake. The reason no one ever sees him is because he knows he can't let them see him because it'll change the way that they're going to meet him later on. I didn't get the Steve and Dave connection, but that was my big. I even wrote it down. I was at work listening, and I'm like, I wrote it down like Jake's running the whole show or something like that.
Well, if I get to write my book series, that will fill in a lot more of those details of this other Jake and this whole kind of Ostium Network background and world of that area that we haven't done as much